So the impeachment trial was interesting. You had the Congress decide a jurisdictional question, whether or not the trial was constitutional. The Congress said yes. Then, in the trial on the merits, there seemed to be universal agreement that on the merits, the president was guilty. However, 43 senators thereabouts went back to the jurisdictional question, which was already decided. So, you had a majority of the Senate, a supermajority of the Senate, agree that the President of the United States, the then President of the United States, incited a violent mob to attack Congress for the purposes of overturning an election. Then the Senate chose not to hear the trial until after that president left office, and then 43 Republicans said you can't try him because he's out of office, which a majority of the Congress decided otherwise. What? So hi, I'm Tristan. This is Thinking About Politics, and today we're talking about impeachments. Because the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack Congress, and that apparently isn't enough to be an impeachable offense.
Hey, this is Tristan from the future here. I'm going to keep using the term impeachment, and what I really mean is removal from office. Sorry about that. Also, I have a super sore throat, so sorry about how weird I sound.
I thought it would be useful to look back on impeachment in the 20th century to today, and just kind of see where we've come from. And where better place to start than the high water mark of it all, Watergate. Men who worked for Nixon's committee to re-elect the president broke into the National Democratic headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. They were caught. Whether or not Nixon knew about the initial robbery, he certainly tried to cover it up. When this news came to light, just the fact that he tried to cover up a crime, it was enough to launch impeachment inquiries, special prosecutors, finally forcing the removal of the president before he could be impeached. He resigned, but to call that voluntary is kind of silly. Watergate and its aftermath represents the high watermark of America's anti-corruption impulse. In the wake of these scandals, new laws came down to regulate campaign spending and contributions to try to prevent the kind of insider playing and corruption that had come to characterize the Nixon administration. Americans elected new faces to come to Washington. And a lot of people credit Jimmy Carter's rise to the fact that people wanted to send outside forces to break up the Washington cabal. But unfortunately, the story of the last 40 years has really been this downward trajectory, where our tolerance for corruption has just become far more pronounced, and we're way more lenient with our political officials today than we've ever been. And I gotta wonder why, if that's really a recipe for longevity. Our next point of interest on this trek down memory lane is the Iran-Contra affair. Hit it! So the Iran-Contra affair really refers to two separate policies undertaken by the Reagan administration in the mid-1980s. The first policy was to sell Iran, an enemy of the United States, weapons, which they would then use in a war against an ally of the United States, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. So that's the Iran part in the Iran-Contra affair. Now let's talk about the Contras. Nicaragua is a Central American country in which the United States had long played a role in its government. Now, the people of Nicaragua had elected a party called the Sandinistas, which were opposed to the United States domination of the country. In response arose a right-wing paramilitary group of death squads called the Contras, who went against the Sandinistas. Now, Congress cut off funding for the Contras, partially because of their bloody tactics, reports of murder, and all sorts of bad stuff. So the Reagan administration sought to replace this funding with private funding, therefore obviating the need to go to Congress. Where this Iran policy coincided with the Contra policy is that when there was profits from the sales of weapons to the Iranians, those profits were then funneled to the Contras, hence the term. So, to top this all off, when this came to light, Ronald Reagan then went onto the airwaves and said, I wonder if I can find a clip.
I wanted this time to talk with you about an extremely sensitive and profoundly important matter of foreign policy. There's an old saying that Nothing spreads so quickly as a rumor. So I thought it was time to speak with you directly, to tell you firsthand about our dealings with Iran. The charge has been made that the United States has shipped weapons to Iran as ransom payment for the release of American hostages in Lebanon, that the United States undercut its allies and secretly violated American policy against trafficking with terrorists. Those charges are utterly false. Since the outset of the controversy over our policy relating to Iran, I've done everything in my power to make all the facts concerning this matter known to the American people. And I have said earlier that I would welcome the appointment of an independent counsel to look into allegations of illegality in the sale of arms to Iran and the use of funds from these sales to assist the forces opposing the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. If illegal acts were undertaken, those who did so will be brought to justice. If actions in implementing my policy were taken without my authorization, knowledge, or concurrence, this will be exposed and appropriate corrective steps will be implemented.
Reagan came out and tried to deny it. However, when it became impossible to deny the facts...
These past 9 months have been confusing and painful ones for the country. I know you have doubts in your own minds about what happened in this whole episode. Once I realized I hadn't been fully informed, I sought to find the answers. Some of the answers I don't like. My fellow Americans, I've thought long and often about how to explain to you what I intended to accomplish. But I respect you too much to make excuses. The fact of the matter is that there's nothing I can say that will make the situation right. I was stubborn in my pursuit of a policy that went astray. The other major issue of the hearings, of course, was the diversion of funds to the Nicaraguan Contras. I believed then, and I believe now, in preventing the Soviets from establishing a beachhead in Central America. Since I have been so closely associated with the cause of the Contras, the big question during the hearings was whether I knew of the diversion. I was aware the resistance was receiving funds directly from third countries and from private efforts, and I endorsed those endeavors wholeheartedly. But let me put this in capital letters. I did not know about the diversion of funds. Indeed, I didn't know there were excess funds.
So here we have an American president who took to the airwaves and said a blatant not truth to the American public. Was he lying? Was he just unaware of the truth? Bigger question is, does it matter? Whether or not the president is lying or was just really unaware of what was going on, the buck stops with the president. In an age of higher morals, Ronald Reagan would have resigned. Instead, he hid behind his ignorance, and you really got to wonder how much of that was the mental fog that was already falling over the president, who suffered from Alzheimer's. In any event, Nixon was going to get removed because he lied about a break-in in a hotel. Ronald Reagan was lying about arms sales to America's enemies to fund right-wing death squads. Messed up. Anyway, next, we're off to the 90s to get totally radical. Yeah, Bill Clinton got a blowjob. He didn't get impeached for that, though. See, you really gotta, take this one for what it is. There was a long-standing investigation into the Clintons, looking into past allegations of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, looking into past real estate deals. The right wing hated Bill Clinton. I'm not a huge Clinton fan, but you gotta recognize that the hatred these people had to endure was completely ridiculous. So in that context, Bill Clinton, while under investigation, gets fellatio from a young intern. The bad thing here is not the sex. I mean, it's icky. I think we should have higher standards than that, but let's take this off the table. They asked that intern to lie to prosecutors and to say that, no affair happened. That's, wrong. And when they asked Bill Clinton about whether or not he did some of this stuff, he lied under oath. He committed perjury. It's just a fact. Now, you can have lots of counter arguments here. You can argue that, hey, this was really about the right wing just being out to get Clinton, that this is really about people's outrage about the sex and the adultery. Yeah, maybe you're right there. Whatever. It's not the sex. It's the perjury. Maybe Democrats should have impeached Bill Clinton. There's a pattern emerging here, and I just want you to feel me with it. Nixon lied about the Watergate break-in. He tried to cover that up. And Reagan either lied or should have known about Iran-Contra and his role in it. Bill Clinton lied under oath. That's serious. We gotta hold our public officials to a higher standard. I'm sorry. If I lie under oath, it's a big flippin' deal. It should probably be an impeachable offense if the president lies under oath, even for a speeding ticket. Call me like old-fashioned. Old-fashioned. But just, I don't know. Seems like a real duh thing to me. But then that brings us to my original nemesis. George W. Bush failed to prevent 9/11. I'll repeat that for you. George W. Bush failed to prevent 9/11. In August, they received a presidential briefing that informed them that Osama bin Laden was determined to attack within the United States.
Bin Laden determined to strike in U.S. Those 7 words appeared in a presidential daily brief more than a month before the September 11th attacks.
That whole summer, I was in the Counterterrorist Center along with that author and a small group of others who were analyzing the threats to the United States from terrorist groups. And there was no doubt in anyone's mind that a major attack was coming. This was not a surprise. And there had been a series of pieces put in front of the president into the president's daily brief, which contains many other things as well. But we were certainly pushing the president on the idea that bin Laden is up to something. Al-Qaeda is planning something. There were upwards of 40 different pieces in the president's daily brief in the 9 months or so before September 11th, talking about bin Laden. This specific piece on August 6th, the one that the 9/11 Commission published, and therefore it became famous, it speaks specifically to bin Laden's intent to attack in the United States.
It is fascinating to know that there were so many of these memos. We know of this one, right? It is the most famous, but it's important to remember there were dozens leading up to it, and that President Bush did ask about it. It's not like, it wasn't on his radar, bin Laden and Al-Qaeda.
Then George W. Bush lied to the American people to get us into an unrelated war in Iraq. It cost billions of dollars. It cost thousands of American lives. It cost millions of Iraqis. We're still paying for this mistake today. And there was nothing. But oh my God, was that just prelude? Donald Trump, 2-time national disgrace. Many-time national disgrace. 2-time impeachee. First for extortion, and second for insurrection. In the first trial, the White House refused to turn over evidence. Instead of forcing the issue, Congress rolled over. The Senate didn't vote to hear a single witness. There has never been anything quite like it. And in the second trial, more than 2/3 of the Senate agreed he was guilty. 43 people voted to acquit anyway. This is not a recipe for longevity, people. This is not how great powers behave. We gotta, step it up here. It is okay to demand more from your elected officials. Going into public office is not a career, it is a charge. It is a responsibility. It's an honor. Now, I appreciate people want to play nice. I appreciate that people are worried about holding presidents to too high a standard. But is anybody really worried about that right now? That impeachment got me bummed. Anyway, that's all I got for today. So until next time, keep thinking.
At times, I've been mad as a hornet.